Now let's say our application is growing, and besides this awesome counter feature, we now also got a user auth component which deals with user authentication. So in there, we have a button where we say log in, and a button where we say log out, and it depends on the auth state which button we're going to show. Now, of course, we could manage this locally in the component, but again, authentication might matter to a lot of parts of this app, so we want to manage it with Vuex instead. Here, I just got this template with the two buttons. In app view, I'm now going to import user auth from components, userauth.view, and register this as a new component, user auth. And therefore we can now use this, and I will create a new container here to also show it visually that this is a different part of the app. User auth. Give this container a title prop of auth, and make sure I only show the first container if we are authenticated. Now at the moment we see those buttons, but of course they don't do anything. Well, that's something we can fix with Vuex. And before I dive into the utility features we have for managing bigger applications with different kinds of state, here's a quick pause which you can use to add the functionality in Vuex to react to a login and a logout click, to manage some is logged in state, to show just one of the two buttons, and to show or hide this base container based on the auth state. So add a new state and all the getters, mutations, and actions you might need to manage this is logged in state, which can be true or false in the end. Here's a chance for you to pause the video, thereafter we'll implement it together. Were you successful? Let's do it together now. So I want to manage an auth state. So in my state, in my store here, I will have a is logged in state. Of course, the name is up to you, which initially is false, let's say. Now, in order to change it, I want one or two mutations, depending on how you design the mutation. I will add one mutation and name it setAuth, where I expect to get the state, of course, and a payload. And the payload will be important here because it will tell me whether I want to set the auth state to authenticated or to not authenticated. So here I set state is logged in equal to payload is auth, let's say. And that can be true or false. Now this is just my approach. You probably have a different one, and that might be fine as well. It's just one way of doing it. Now that's my mutation, but we shouldn't necessarily call mutations directly from inside components, as you learned. So I will add actions. Now we could add a setAuth action, which basically works like the mutation, or we add two actions to mix things up, a login action and a logout action. Again, it's just my way of implementing this. We get this context object, and in login, I want to commit setAuth. That's the name of my mutation, this one. And the payload will be an object here where I set isAuth to true because it's the login action. I want to set the user to logged in. So this isAuth property, which I'm reading here in the mutation, is true now. And in logout, it's almost the same. It's the same mutation which I commit, but it's false. Now, of course, these actions could be asynchronous. In reality, we are probably sending some HTTP requests around, but here I will not care about that. I will keep it simple and keep it synchronous. But in actions, of course, we could also use asynchronous code, as you learned. So now we got actions, mutations, and a state. What's missing? A getter. So I will add a new getter. Name is up to you. I will name it user is authenticated. And in here, we get our state. And I will return state is logged in, which is true or false. Now I have everything in the store which I want to have there. With that, back in user auth, I want to wire up these buttons. So I'll add my script part and now add my methods for the actions that should be dispatched. We could use map actions here, or we add them manually, totally up to you. To show all approaches, I will add them manually here, add a login and a logout method here. And in login, I will call this store dispatch login, because login was the action name I defined. And for logout, it's the same, but of course with the logout action. And now we can set up the click listeners, trigger our login method on the first button, and trigger logout on the second button. With that, we should be manipulating the state. Now to reflect it, I also want to listen to changes. For example, here I only want to show one of the two buttons at the same time. For that, we can use computed to get access to the getters, either with map getters or by setting up our own computed properties. And here I'll add the isAuth computed property, where I return this store getters, and I named the getter user is authenticated, so that's the getter I want to access here. And now isAuth is a computed property, which is true or false. And with VIF, I'll show the login button if isAuth is false, because if the user is not authenticated, I want to show the login button. And I want to show the logout button if we are authenticated. And we can copy the computed property into the app view file now, here, like this, because I also need isAuth here to show or hide this first base container. So here with VIF, I want to show it if isAuth is true and hide it if it's false. With that, initially we don't see it because initially we're not logged in. But if I click login, we see it, we can change everything. But if I click logout, we hide it. So that works, and that's an extra piece of state managed. Now that was a nice practice, but I started this lecture mentioning that our app could be getting bigger and that we had more and more state to manage. So here in this demo, we now added at least a little bit of extra info to our store. Vuex also gives us utility methods and features when it comes to managing bigger stores with different kinds of state inside of it.